Memphis leaders have a serious problem on their hands tonight. 3 shootings in downtown Memphis in the last 4 days attributed to youth violence. And the solution is not as easy as enforcing the city's teen curfew law. Action News 5's Joyce Peterson live in studio with the reason why. Joyce.
Yeah, Joy, 2 of the shootings happened on Beale Street over the weekend. And then today, as MPD and city leaders met specifically to figure out what to do to prevent another youth-involved shooting downtown, shots rang out at Tom Lee Park.
It's a sensitive issue when we're trying to manage our children. It's a very sensitive issue, and sometimes we find ourselves in a gray area.
Memphis Police Chief C.J. Davis briefing the City Council Tuesday about this. 2 groups of teenagers fighting on Beale Street Friday night, leading to a shooting injuring 1 young woman. MPD and its federal partners had already handled another shooting nearby an hour earlier. MPD, the Downtown Memphis Commission, and Mayor Young's administration grappling with how to deal with juvenile crime.
How do we discover weapons on young people that come to our downtown space without searching everybody?
As city leaders met to discuss that, this happened. A man tackled by police after a young woman was shot at Tom Lee Park in broad daylight. Monday, Mayor Paul Young was asked about enforcing the city's teen curfew ordinance.
There are some challenges with implementation because we have to ensure that we have the appropriate place to take the individuals if and when they do encounter law enforcement.
This was never intended to be any type of detention facility.
Chief Davis and MPD struggled with this same issue 3 years ago when Uptown residents objected to the Greenlaw Community Center being used to house teens breaking curfew. The recent shootings putting city leaders and citizen safety back in that gray area.
Of how we, gently deal with a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, even a 13 and 14-year-old that has a weapon.
Mayor Young says curfew enforcement may be an option.
It is something that we're exploring because we think that it's unacceptable to have 14-year-olds running around downtown 11:30 at night.
All right, MPD says the young women who were shot on Beale Street Friday night and Tom Lee Park today are both expected to survive. No update on the man who was shot on Beale Street Friday. Chief Davis did say swift arrests were made in the Beale Street shootings. We are still awaiting information about the Tom Lee Park suspects. Live in studio tonight, I'm Joyce Peterson. Joy, back to you.